Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, how are billionaires planning to survive the apocalypse? I'm Cody, your host for this week, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hey, welcome back for the week. Thank you for joining us again here on Propaganda Loves You. So this week we're going to talk about a couple different things. We want to provide some weekly updates and talk about a couple of reflections from our last couple episodes. There's been a few articles that have come out recently regarding U.S. State Department policy around social media censorship, is what they're calling it, in foreign countries. So we'll discuss that a little bit. And then we had a couple things come up in our fact check that made us want to dig a little more on the bunker industry, I guess is what we could call it, private bunkers or apocalypse industry. I don't know. There's a lot of words for that, but yeah, so we'll talk about that today. But before we kind of get into that, we do want to cover our fact check from episode 11. So, Joe, Arthur, this was the one that we did talking mostly about Grok and Gaza and the big, beautiful bill and all of the things that are associated with that. So for this, our AI fact checker came back with 43 claims from our hosts, a little bit more than we saw last time. So of those 43 claims, what do we think for factually accurate, needs clarification, or factually inaccurate?
I think we're just getting better, I think we got to be pretty up there, unless the fact checker has a skew towards the Israel issue. Then we might be at a severe, needs clarification.
Yeah, it's a questionable one, huh?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It's hard to know. What's Google's bias?
yeah, exactly. It depends on, like we always said, who controls the tech. There are ways to build biases into these systems. I have no idea what it's gonna say about our episode, but I know we got into some more controversial topics, and if there are any, if there's anyone putting their foot on the lever, that's going to start. I don't think it'll be as obvious as Grok in South Africa or whatever. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it handles some of those issues. Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so of the 43 claims, our fact checker came back and said that 20 are factually accurate, 19 need clarification, and only 4 are factually inaccurate. So not terrible, but for the one thing that I'll say before going through some of these, it's interesting what it started pulling out, and I'll talk about this a little bit in the weekly updates. It's kind of be an update on AI in general and how LLMs work. But I was up till a little bit past midnight last night working with this because I was running into a lot of issues. Where it had a lot of trouble was actually around all of the comments around the bill. So the 4 that it called factually inaccurate. The first one, Joe, was the Pentagon failed 20 audits in a row. So the response that this came back with was that as of its full financial statement audit started in 2018, and it's failed every single one since then. So it's failed 7 consecutive audits. So while 20 is a little bit of an exaggeration, it has failed every audit. So
Are we saying that it only started in 2018, the audit process for the Pentagon?
For the way that it came back was saying that it's a full department audit. I think there was smaller audits that they did within there, but as far as the entire department failing the audit, that process started in 2018 and they have not passed a single audit.
Got it. So they just didn't have the opportunity for 13 times prior.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that number I wasn't too sure about, obviously, but yeah, the point still stands. I just remember Jon Stewart interviewing some spokeswoman from the Department of Defense on stage somewhere, and he was pointing this audit thing out to her, and she was like, trying to skew it to make it sound like it's not a big deal, and he was like, what are you talking about? That's what stuck out to me, but yeah, that's fun.
Okay, and so the next factually inaccurate claim was from me. This is when I stated that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, if you earn $50,000 or less, you're going to pay more in taxes. The issue that it had with this is that in the initial years, basically 2025 to 2028, there will be a small benefit to most earners because they've got additional like boosts basically in what you can get back from tax credits and things like that all expire at the end of Donald Trump's term. So that's where it has issues with that. And then basically what it says is past 2028, yes, like this group would actually end up paying more in taxes if these aren't extended, basically. And the next one's kind of similar to that. Arthur, I think you said like only the top 30% are going to benefit, and they'll have like basically hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or less. This is basically almost the same thing here. It's just saying that's kind of like an overstatement, like that this is going to come from like the top 1%, 5%, and 20%. While they might benefit the most, there will be small benefits again from that 2025 to 2028 year for those lower income earners as well. It's just like when these benefits actually drop off. The last one that it kind of called out again was for the act when we talked about 125 billion for DoD and increase. Basically what it had was it was an issue with the 125 billion figure. It's not precise for the total combined specific line items. So that was the issue that it had here with kind of that broad statement that, you know, the increase was that, because it's actually that money's not just going to the Department of Defense, right? It's going towards specific programs within Homeland Security, specifically for deportation and things like that. So it was just trying to get more accurate. And then I'll just run through just some of the interesting ones from needs clarification. Some of these are really just adding additional context, like the example of 800 billionaires in the country. What it came back with is 770 to 790 billionaires. It's like,
How dare I
I
misspeak?
know. I think that one's pretty good. I don't know. Okay, yeah, this one was interesting. So Joe, former senior Bush official, said publicly that 20 to 21 trillion was spent on private underground bunkers. So this was actually attributed to Catherine Austin Fitts, who did work for the Bush administration and did come out with this claim. The 21 trillion number seems to come from Mark Skidmore's research on kind of like where, actually I think it was mostly related to Department of Defense and like money going missing in Department of Defense can't be accounted for. However, Catherine Fitts has also made some pretty, I guess, conspiratorial claims around like COVID and some other things. So her credibility is not super high. And that 21 trillion number is hard to like, there's no like corroboration that it's going towards specific like underground bunkers or anything like that. Having said that, this made me start looking into the underground bunker industry. We'll talk about that in a little bit because yeah, there's billions and billions of dollars going into creating these underground bunkers for people that are afraid of the apocalypse. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Needs clarification, like Joe, the 2.3 million people in Gaza Strip. The clarification here was that 2.2 to 2.3 million pre-October 2023. So we're talking like before all of this.
That's a good clarification.
Yeah.
Someone had pointed it out one time that Trump had randomly mentioned something super specific about Gaza and was like, yeah, there's 1.9 million people in Gaza, something like that. And it was just such a weirdly specific, slightly lower number that people were like trying to figure who gave him that. How does he, what are their internal counts about the death count? And what are we not getting told about that? Because the number of dead in Gaza has been officially reported like 40 to 50,000 for months and months and months, but they're still getting bombed every day. So it's like, there's no way that number is accurate at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably a good context to have on that one for sure. Let's see if there's any others here that are really interesting. The other kind of like questionable, or not questionable, but clarification ones. Honestly, most of these are just additional context, like agreeing with Arthur, your claim around 600 humanitarian aid trucks per day and only 100 being allowed in. 8 organizations like UN, RWA, and OCHA, they consistently stated pre-conflict levels are around 500 to 600 trucks daily. The number of trucks through 2023 to 2025 has fluctuated significantly, often falling short of this, with daily averages sometimes below 100 or in the low 100s, though occasionally higher. So again, largely in line with everything that was said, just adding additional context there. I did want to talk about the factually accurate statements for a second, because I do think it says something here. So almost all of the statements around genocide in Gaza are linked as factually accurate, that came back as factually accurate, using all of the same thing, like from the experts that were cited in the video. Pretty much all of these are in the factually accurate category. In fact, I don't think any of them, I'm looking through the list right now, when it comes to the needs clarification. I already read the one about the Gaza food trucks, like that was in a clarification portion. And the only other two were the 15 aid workers killed on video and the IDF warning shots. So again, the reason it flagged this in needs clarification isn't because this didn't happen. What it says is there have been multiple reported incidents of aid and emergency workers killed in Gaza, with some video evidence leading to international scrutiny and involving explanations from the IDF. For example, the World Central Kitchen strike in April 2024 killed 7 workers, involved video and shifting IDF accounts. While the specific number 15 in a single event captured on video needs precise incident matching, the pattern of such events and changing IDF responses is documented. So that's like, it didn't know the specific one, but there's been enough of them to say, like, yeah, like this is likely true. Same exact thing for the IDF firing warning shots at allied nations in their country. That's not the first time that has happened, apparently. But yeah.
They bombed a U.S. ship like decades ago, like in the 70s or something. I can't remember the name of the ship, but yeah, they just straight up bombed a U.S. ship and killed U.S. military people, I'm pretty sure, back in like the 70s or something. I was going to say it's like a silver lining of living in the internet age, is that when atrocities like this are going on, the information exchange is so rapid and so like widely documented and widespread that it's impossible for them to hide blatant atrocities like this. And there have been so many examples in Gaza since this stuff started a couple of years ago. There's like the big one that was near the beginning was like, I think it was Al Nasser Hospital was struck by a huge missile, and the IDF tried to say it was like a Hamas rocket that went rogue or something. And Biden even repeated that when he went to visit Netanyahu, and then the whole narrative unraveled, and it was obviously the IDF. And then since then, they've just destroyed every hospital and university basically that they could in Gaza. So crazy to track in real time. But I'm glad we're doing it.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I was pretty happy with what came back from this. And like I said, I'll explain more the issues that I had with it last night, because it's more just an education piece on how to use large language models. But as far as what it didn't feel like there was a specific bias that was being pushed in the responses. It felt like it was trying to stay pretty neutral. But again, once we have the website live, we'll basically take these reports and load them up there so you can go back. Maybe we'll do it as like a blog thing on the Substack or something like that, so you guys can review and see, if you agree with our fact checker. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
Did you see the news? Empty shelves, supply chain chaos. It feels like someone wants us dependent, weak.
They're trying to control us. What happens when the trucks stop? When the obey grid goes down? How will we feed our families?
Friends, fear is a choice. Preparation is a victory. With Victory Provisions long-term food kits, you control your own destiny.
Food kits? Like survival food?
Delicious, nutrient-dense freedom meals. Shelf-stable for 25 years. Enough calories to outlast any manufactured crisis or government-mandated famine. It's the ultimate insurance policy for patriots.
So we can tell them where to stick their Soylent Green?
Exactly. Be self-reliant. Be prepared. Be victorious. Order your Victory Provisions today. Don't wait until it's too late.
Manufactured crisis and government-mandated famine not confirmed events. Victory Provisions taste described as tactically adequate. Shelf life assumes optimal storage conditions, unlike your panic room.
Let's move on to weekly updates.
The only thing I did was I saw They Live in theaters at the local art cinema. Really, really loved it. And everybody was like cheering. It was sold out. It's a 60-person theater, sold out. And everybody was like cheering. And it was a really nice camaraderie, solidarity kind of movie. And everybody was like laughing at all the over-the-top signs that point to our culture right now. And it was kind of funny, actually, in the movie. Didn't y'all watch it recently? In the movie, there's a news moment, and the guy says, by the year 2025. So it's kind of a fun, nod to, they make some claims about today's culture, but nothing else besides.
I'm excited for when we do the live viewing on Twitch for that. Or is it? Yeah, we're on Twitch, right? that'll be good.
Yeah, that's a super fun movie. I'm jealous you got to see it in theaters, but like sold out, like that When was that movie made?
Yeah, I know. And I think it's just like they're doing like the local art scene was doing like a whole John Carpenter series, and I think the community just gets really into it. And it's the kind of place that sells like they had like spring rolls for sale and whatever, like high end like wine and stuff. So people loved it. And there were like people who actually came in late and they couldn't find seats, which I haven't really experienced in a movie in a while. Bring back the classics. Yeah.
Trying to remember that hilarious line that just feels so random when he's going on the shooting rampage and he's like, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum.
That's like the greatest line. Apparently, I read it last night that he improvised it.
No way.
Roddy
It's
Piper,
crazy.
yeah.
Classic. My update is nowhere near as fun as that. I'm doing a 5K tomorrow. The 5K is actually with one of the letter organization you mentioned, Cody, UNWRA or UNRWA. It's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency that primarily does food distribution and medical aid for refugees and for people in Gaza. So they organize 5Ks every year. So you can just go to Gaza 5K, like the numeral 5, the letter K.org. The one I'm doing is in DC tomorrow at Rock Creek Park. They have one in Seattle on August the 3rd and one in New York City on October 12th. So they do these as like fundraisers to support refugee mental health. And it's just like I'm not even going to run, probably. I'm going with my family, and we're just going to walk through the park and sort of enjoy the park for a few miles and maybe get a t-shirt or something. That's my update.
Are you going to start training again for half marathons like we used to?
Oh, no, I don't. I think I'm past the running phase at this point, to be honest. I'll do a little exercise these days, but I'm not getting on the shoes and going outside and jogging and feeling my face skin jiggle around. Nah, I don't know if I'm down for that anymore.
Yeah, I think my athletic endeavors are like golf, but with a cart, All right, so for updates from me this week, I think the big one, we put a disclaimer on the episode last week just talking about how we're kind of changing up our release methodology a little bit. So I want to just explain that in a little more depth than the 5 seconds or whatever we put on the first episode. We really just want to aim to make sure we're keeping our episodes at a digestible length. And we also want to try and provide multiple formats for consumption. Some people, I think, probably like listening to the more like the ads and the conversation, where some people might just like the in-depth deep dives and some people might just like the book club. So what we're trying to do is be able to provide those options to everybody in a way that they can access that without needing to necessarily absorb a bunch of content that maybe they're less interested in, right? So that's why we're kind of breaking it up into Tuesday and Thursdays. Tuesday is kind of just this conversation here, and then Thursdays will be where we do either book reviews, deep dives, or movie reviews, or who knows what else. Maybe we'll get some interviews going or something like that in the close future. So just want to provide that update. And we are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now. The podcast is available there. Once we have a little bit more of our marketing and, advertising up and running, we also have all of the video recordings of all the podcasts that you've listened to so far. So we're going to be editing them in a little bit of a different format. So it won't be the exact same podcast that you've already listened to. We're actually going to take some of those longer conversations and try and put them together in video format. So once that goes live, it'll be a little bit different. It might be some similar content, but could also provide, that longer form conversation that some people are more interested in listening to. So yeah, the other update I wanted to provide, as I was doing some of the editing for one of the last episodes, actually the last one that dropped last Thursday, the China, Iran, and North Korea focused disinformation episode, I realized that it didn't really explain why we were focusing on those 4 countries specifically, or why I was focusing on those 4 countries specifically. So I wanted to just take a second and explain that those 4 countries, like the Department of Defense has had kind of a way of looking at near peer or adversaries throughout the globe in a way that's been called, for a long time, it's been called 4+1. So it's looking at what are the biggest threats to America. This is how defense structure of the U.S. kind of looks at this. What are those biggest threats to America? And those have pretty traditionally been Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And then why it says 4+1 is because the +1 generally was terrorism for the last 20 years, right? This format of the way of looking at the world has changed a little bit throughout the years. I think some people are recommending like a 2+3 view, which is like Russia and China are the biggest threats, and then Iran, North Korea, and terrorism are like the next 3 after that. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it's a very American Department of Defense way of looking at the world and adversaries and why we're focusing on that. I just wanted to mention that, especially Joe, since you brought up there are other people that are also trying to influence American elections, right? Like that's not the only people out there. And honestly, the US has done its fair share of coups and overthrows and influencing elections around the world too, right? So by focusing on this, we're not just saying like these are the only people doing this stuff in the world. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. That's why, those were the ones we're focusing on. It's part of my bias and part of my previous experience. And honestly, part of what I know more about because of having spent more time in those areas as well. So then let's jump into our 8 topics for the week. So we got a couple different things we're going to talk about. Like I mentioned, the first one I want to talk about, there was a recent report that was released by, I think, Health and Human Services from RFK and his team. It's like Make America Healthy Again report, MAHA, is I think what they're calling it. It kind of blew up on social media platforms because when people started reviewing the report, what they noticed was there was a number of citations in the report that didn't exist. And when I say didn't exist, I mean like literally it's citing a report that never was written and it had authors attached to it, and like some of the authors came out and like, I never wrote a report called that. I don't know where you're getting this information from. And so there's a lot of accusations like that this is coming from AI generated content and it just hallucinated sources and it just created those citations and no one actually went through and checked and made sure they were real. Who knows what the real answer is? That sounds probable to me, because if you work with large language models and you don't verify the output or understand prompt engineering to a point where you're only limiting to verified sources, or you provide the sources that you want it to write off of, right? There's a few ways that you can work with it to make sure that you're getting accurate results. But if you're just throwing in prompts and saying, hey, I want this, and you're just taking the output, this is exactly what happens, right? You get content that doesn't exist in your report. So the only reason that was kind of connected to what I was doing last night was because I was working off of our AI fact-checking agent. We use Gemini for that. Well, we use a combination of Gemini and ChatGPT. But what was happening last night is I would run it and it would come back to me and it would tell me like we'd have like 20 things that are factually inaccurate. And then I'd have to go through and be like, okay, why are these factually inaccurate? And all it was doing is it was working off its training data. No matter how many times I told it to like go and search the open internet and try and validate like, is this real or not? It would default to training data, which is a date cutoff of like 2023, right? I'm not sure about the exact date there, but so anything newer than that, it basically was flagging as like, this isn't true. The one example was the conversation in the White House between Donald Trump and the president of South Africa. It was like, Donald Trump's not the president. Like, I don't know what you're talking about there, because, as of 2023, he wasn't the president. So that's just one thing that you really need to be aware of, that it can make errors based off of outdated information if it's only looking at its training data. And then another thing that can tend to happen here if one of these models is working off its training data is it can give you citations based on its training data, right? So it'll give you a citation that's like an internal citation for data that it has that doesn't actually go anywhere on the open internet. That happens all the time. And so initially, like what you have to do in that case, like if you're trying to find the specific article that it's referencing, is take the title and like who wrote it, like if it's the Atlantic or something like that. And then you have to go Google search that, find the right article, and then you have to bring that new article in, making sure that that's what you're using for citations, and that if there's been any updates, that you're pulling that updated information from the article. So like that happens constantly. And I kind of assumed that that was what was occurring with the MAHA report, right? Was that it was something like outdated training data, and that maybe that that the article was out there, it just didn't catch that, and so it was using a internal citation that didn't exist. No, that's not the case. The articles themselves were completely fabricated, which means that if they were using an LLM for this, like I mentioned, they were not putting the guardrails on it to make sure that it's actually pulling from legitimate sources or fact-checking the sources to make sure that they were real. And that's what would result in a hallucination of a complete made-up source there. So not 100% sure if that's what happened, but it would make sense based off of what we're seeing. It sounds like the Make America Healthy Again crew did not take that lesson when creating that document. So just wanted to mention that and see what you guys think.
This guy, RFK, didn't he say something the other week about like people shouldn't be listening to me for medical advice or something?
He did.
I think that's his direct quote is people should not be listening to me for medical advice. And it's like he's the head of like, yeah, it's not surprising. I thought the whole tariff thing had some AI components, people kind of put that together too. And it just seems like the whole administration is just using AI and not caring to follow up with it. Like you're saying, like they're not actually fact checking it at all. They're just taking the first prompt that the AI is giving them and they're running with it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're treating it like it's AGI, like it's actual general intelligence, but it's not. Like it's a large language model that you have to understand how it works to some extent to make sure you're getting the output that you're actually looking for. And you would think with XAI and some of the people, I don't know how they end up with some of the really shoddy documents that they do. They definitely have people that understand LLMs into orbit. They're just not listening to them, or I don't know what's going on there. It's really strange.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's weird. It's like just kind of sloppy. I've seen other examples too, of like when they're going after all the DEI people, like recently hired people. What's it called you're on probation basically. Once you get hired, you have like a 2-year probationary period or whatever.
Yep.
A lot of those people were automatically getting fired if they were related to any sort of DEI hiring process at all. And someone had pointed it out that like some random, I wish I could remember the specific example. I'm just trying to pull it from the top of my head, so this might be all kinds of inaccurate. But there was I think it was a military unit or something related to the DOD, and it had the word gay in the name, but it was like a person's name, like so-and-so gay senior, whatever. And it was like named after that person, but it got flagged for removal because it had the word gay in it. And it's like just an obvious example where they're using just a broad brush to be like, we're lazy, but we want to be mean, so we're just going to tell this AI to do things. I don't know. It's really embarrassing to watch.
That wasn't
I thought they had
the
a
Enola Gay, was it?
the
Oh,
Enola,
sorry.
yeah. That's what I was going to say too. The Enola Gay, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I can't remember specifically.
And I think the other part was, I think for Doge, there was a news article came out that they basically used Llama, which is weird to me, which is like Meta's AI for categorizing the 5 bullets emails, like the what have you done this week emails that they were requiring from the entire government. Which again, like, why are you, I don't know. I don't even know what the point of that is, to be honest, but hey, there it is. He's no longer with Doge anymore, so it doesn't matter at this point.
He's no longer in charge. Whatever.
All right.
Yeah, I know that the llama stuff. Like, I wonder if that was like after the whole Zuckerberg private dinner too. All these people paying $5 million for private dinners with DJT.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Yeah, but we'll probably maybe, I don't know, update our podcast description to include a little bit more about tech, because I feel like we're going to be talking about AI and probably just cyber in general a little bit more, just because of the overlap between that kind of area and disinformation and propaganda and how both are used. Like, cyber operations, when I say cyber operations, I mean generally like people that do hacking and stuff like that for different nation states. That is a delivery mechanism for disinformation and propaganda, right? So it's intrinsically connected in how it's being used today. So yeah, we'll probably keep this as a topic that we continue to revisit in the future.
Yeah, and it's like, in terms of understanding the present moment as a historical moment, we have to understand what's going on, and the tech is an unavoidable part of that. Like the AI developments, the use of tech by fascists, by oppressive regimes, like it's a big part of even like the Israel-Palestine thing. They're using AI targeting systems to decide where to drop bombs in a lot of cases. And you can't avoid the topic. We're going to have to talk about tech a lot.
Okay, so let's move on to our next topic here. The topic I want to hit on really quickly was a press statement from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that came out on May 28th that also got quite a bit of traction online. So I'm just going to read the whole press statement right here. The title of this is Announcement of a Visa Restriction Policy Targeting Foreign Nationals Who Censor Americans. And the statement is as such. Free speech is among the most cherished rights we enjoy as Americans. This right, legally enshrined in our Constitution, has set us apart as a beacon of freedom around the world. Even as we take action to reject censorship at home, we are seeing troubling instances of foreign governments and foreign officials picking up the slack. In some instances, foreign officials have taken flagrant censorship actions against U.S. tech companies and U.S. citizens and residents when they have no authority to do so. Today, I'm announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign nationals who are responsible for censorship of protected expression in the United States. It is unacceptable for foreign officials to issue or threaten arrest warrants on U.S. citizens or U.S. residents for social media posts on American platforms while physically present on U.S. soil. It is similarly unacceptable for foreign officials to demand that American tech platforms adopt global content moderation policies or engage in censorship activities that reaches beyond their authority and into the United States. We will not tolerate encroachments upon American sovereignty, especially when such encroachments undermine the exercise of our fundamental right of free speech. So,
Like sometimes I wish these people were at least just artistic or interesting or well-spoken or something. Everything they produce just sounds like a nonsense word salad of ideological hit words that just are designed to give people a certain feeling. It doesn't mean they almost say nothing. It's so incomprehensible the way they write this stuff. Really frustrating.
Remember, it was like the Republican response video to maybe the second Obama election, and Rubio keeps like reaching for a water bottle like 80 times, and he's just like panicking and sweating, like what I would do if I were that situation. But
Yeah, it was hilarious. It was like serious amateur hour, like panicking on camera moment. Like it's really funny to watch.
it's crazy, like how this is conspiracy time, but I gotta wonder what they've got on him because he has completely changed a lot. I mean, then again, a lot of Republican representatives have either changed or started showing true colors quite a bit more recently.
Lindsey Graham.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So just to like close out on this whole thing from censorship and censoring foreign or censoring expression or whatnot. Like the thing that gets me about this is just, again, this is in my mind, this is like embodiment of American exceptionalism belief thought process, right? It's like, oh, you can't affect our rights. Our rights are inalienable, but whatever your laws are, yeah, we don't care about those, right? Like it's like completely bonkers. Like if you really think about like who is trying to regulate American tech companies, I think there was an issue between Brazil and Elon Musk a little while ago where like he was spreading disinformation on their platforms, and so they blocked him. And I think that's like, is it hyper capitalism when our government is basically propping up our tech companies and trying to protect them from global regulations at that point? Like it's nuts.
I think that is unfortunately just normal capitalism or normal historical American capitalism. Smedley Butler, famous, I think he got the Medal of Honor, Smedley Butler, but
right.
Famous Marine. Yeah, he's really well decorated. But after his service, he went around telling people that he felt like he had been used as a gangster for capitalism. The American government has always gone to bat around the country and invaded places and done whatever they want to do to protect the interests of American business. Like the 50th state, Hawaii, you can sort of say was for the benefit of the Dole Fruit Company. Pineapples, but I don't know. We'll see what the fact checker says about that. But yeah, pretty historical trend.
Yeah. He Smedley Butler too, like, yeah, so I pulled up his Wikipedia page just to confirm. But yeah, he's the most decorated Marine in history with 2 medals of honor and a whole bunch of other stuff. But he was also the one involved in the business plot. Did you guys tracking that? Like so it was like 1930s, like back when Roosevelt was president. It was literally like Wall Street was trying to install Smedley Butler as like a, overthrow Roosevelt. Like this is back in the 30s this occurred. And Smedley Butler, to his credit, basically came out and was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is the most un-American shit ever. Like, so, it's like, that one person standing up for what's actually right just kind of shut that down. And here we are, and we're almost in the exact same situation, and no one's shutting that down.
On the Rubio stuff, censorship of I guess it's like targeting foreign repression of speech. And it feels like we just ignore our own. Like ICE literally is policing and surveilling Black activists and Muslim communities, or like we arrest whistleblowers like Daniel Hale. It's like obviously free speech is not actually something that we value. And then the other side of this is that it usually these kind of things name China or Iran or Russia, but meanwhile, like Saudi Arabia, they surveil dissidents abroad, or like India, has the crackdown of Sikh activists in the US or in Canada. It's like, we'll protect these people. We're not going to name them, but here we are naming maybe China and Iran or Russia. Seems very selective.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I was just thinking about like, how can we claim that this is about free speech when we're also trying to pass laws making it illegal to protest Israel? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Meta literally took down like Palestinian accounts, and they like other social media accounts, like they flag anybody who's like a journalist in Palestine giving any facts at all. It gets like flagged and immediately taken down on these social media sites. So it's like to say that, I don't know, it's just ridiculous.
Agreed.
Yeah, the hypocrisy is just too obvious to even pretend to take seriously.
And it all seems to be over like this Harvard stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're specifically targeting Harvard. And then it kind of came out that the young Barron didn't get into Harvard. So it's like, is this just like a personal feud of Donald Trump? And then Carolyn Levitt comes out and says like, yeah, totally. Like she said, quote, on some news, I think it was like MSNBC or something, but she said like, we don't need more liberals with LGBTQ degrees or something. We need more plumbers. And it's like,
aren't one of the YMCA guys a plumber or something? Like, I don't know. Don't hate on gays in the plumber community. Like they're
yeah.
there are queer people who are plumbers too. That's so funny.
Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. This week, the U.S. government announced a bold new vision: freedom of speech now available globally.
Introducing Freedom Echo, the new obey feature that alerts you when foreign governments dare to restrict your God-given right to post through it.
Was your meme suppressed in Myanmar? Did your comment about rigged elections vanish in Brazil? That's not censorship. That's an attack on American values.
With Freedom Echo, you'll receive real-time updates every time a foreign nation tells you no. That's right, we're defending the First Amendment right overseas, whether they like it or not.
Because if you can't post conspiracy theories about their government, are they even sovereign?
This isn't just soft power, it's freedom power, backed by sanctions, cloud dominance, and a totally unbiased narrative algorithm.
Obey. Your rights don't stop at our borders, neither do we. Freedom Echo not valid in countries with their own laws. Censorship detection based on vibes, VPN lag, and ethnocentric AI bias. U.S. exceptionalism may apply.
Yeah, last thing for me today, going back to kind of like the bunker conversation and apocalypse and what's been done there. It reminded me of an article that I read a long time ago. Well, a long time ago. It came back in July 2018 is when this originally came out. And it's from Douglas Rushkoff. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a bit long, but we'll link it in the show notes if you want to read that. He actually had a book that he wrote in 2022 that expands on this essay a bit. But I'm just going to read a section of this that's kind of stuck with me ever since reading it the first time. The background here is that he was invited to a deluxe private resort to deliver a keynote speech on the future of technology is kind of what this was pitched as. And it was to like, I think it says up here, like 100 investment bankers. And it was the largest fee he'd ever been offered, about half his annual professor's salary to go do this. And it was, all to deliver insights on the future of technology. And so I'm just going to read directly from the article. After I arrived, I was ushered into what I thought was a green room. But instead of being wired with a microphone or taken to a stage, I just sat there at a plain round table as my audience was brought to me. 5 super wealthy guys. Yes, all men from the upper echelon of the hedge fund world. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I prepared about the future of technology. They had come to me with questions of their own. It started out innocuously enough. Ethereum or Bitcoin? Is quantum computing a real thing? Slowly but surely, however, they edged into their real topics of concern. Which region will be less impacted by the coming climate crisis, New Zealand or Alaska? Is Google really building Ray Kurzweil a home for his brain? Or will his consciousness live through the transition, or will it die and be reborn as a whole new one? Finally, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, "How do I maintain authority over my security force after the event?" The event,
The real
which was
question.
yeah. And then it gets dystopic. So the event, this was their euphemism for an environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, unstoppable virus, or Mr. Robot hack that takes everything down. This single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs. But how would they pay the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on food supply that only they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival, or maybe building robots to serve as guards and the workers if that technology could be developed in time.
That's what they want. That's the Boston Robotics, I think, is their ideal goal, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Explain that a little bit. What's Boston Robotics?
Have you seen those videos online of like Boston Robotics sometimes supposed to? So they have the robot dogs, and then they have robot upright, walking, looks like kind of like humanoids. And they keep progressing. Every year they release, like it kind of pops up on my feed, like the advancement of this technology. It started off with a humanoid robot maybe 10 years ago, kind of fumbling around, kind of walking, could pick up something. Now they can do backflips and somersaults. They're embedding them with the dogs, they're selling these militarized dogs to the military, to police departments. You can actually buy one. I think they're roughly $250,000 or something. And, people might have them to like bring them a drink, but you can put like a gun in it and it can like, use AI in the future to target. And it's disgusting.
Yeah, as soon as you started explaining that, I was like, oh yeah, I have seen some of those videos before, because there's like a Black Mirror episode about the dog, basically.
Yeah, totally.
That is a really terrifying episode, just because how relentless a machine can be. It doesn't need to feed or sleep or anything, it's just like, and it obeys you, right?
Yeah.
To the collars point, I read Octavia Butler is an American science fiction author, famous Black author, and she wrote a couple of books. It was supposed to be a trilogy, I think, but the first one's called A Parable of the Sower, and the second one's Parable of the Talents. But they're these like post-apocalyptic novels that take place like right now. She wrote them like in the late 80s or early 90s, I think, but they take place like 2024, 2025, 2030. And in the second book, the presidential candidate actually has the slogan, "Make America Great Again," and ends up becoming like this fascist right-wing American president. And she just sort of nailed it with that one. But there were a lot of like heady groups of people sort of fighting for scraps at the bottom of the barrel type society. And so slavery became a big thing. People were just catching and selling other people, and they were using these tech collars as control devices to sort of make sure that the people did what they wanted. They could just press a button and put them in extreme agony or kill them if they wanted to. And so they were just using these collars to literally control people. It was a big part of the plot in the second book.
It kind of reminds me of, did you all ever see Wild Wild West? The Wild Wild West with Will Smith? And they have a collar on them when they are entering into some sort of slavery, and it can just like totally decapitate them within an instant.
That's probably where they get most of their ideas, not from Wild Wild West specifically, but like cyberpunk, whatever dystopian, like just fiction, they take that as instruction manual and not warning, right? Like it's great.
The bunker topic's really interesting. It reminded me of, I read about Peter Thiel and how he purchased a New Zealand, like it was like 400 acres, and he became a citizen in New Zealand after only spending a few days there, which is highly unusual. And he has this whole secret bunker thing, and he had some like environmental violation where he built it next to a lake, and like nobody's supposed to use this water, but it's like, I'll just pay the fee kind of thing. And so he already has his compound, and I know Zuckerberg's got the whole Hawaii compound, so it's good. We got to plot exactly where these things are on a map.
Careful, that's how you get put on a list.
Yeah, that's true.
But But no, they're crazy. The underground bunker thing is wild. Like who knows? Like, that woman who you mentioned, I can't remember her name now, but the Bush official slash
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist lady.
Yeah.
I think she had indicated that it's not just underground, like under the mountains in Colorado, but also under the ocean.
Yep.
Like not necessarily in under normal geographical territories.
So we've looked
Actually-
at Epstein Island, but not below.
It's weird. Isn't that the same thing about like the football field sized UFOs underwater or something like that? That's another conspiracy theory that I've heard. But yeah, on the bunker topic, let me just read this really quick because I did pull through this as well. So Catherine Austin Fitts, that's the former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President George H.W. Bush. She was the one that claimed that the U.S. government secretly spent $21 trillion between 1998 and 2015 to construct approximately 170 underground and undersea bunkers designed to shelter elites during catastrophic events. She based the assertion on a 2017 study by economist Mark Skidmore, which I mentioned earlier, which identified $21 trillion in unauthorized spending within the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development during that period. So that's where that number came from, right? And then when I was mentioning earlier about it's important to note that Fitts has not provided concrete evidence to support the claims. Her allegations have been widely regarded as speculative and lack substantive official sources. She made controversial statements, unfounded theories of COVID-19 vaccine, and global mind control, which have further cast doubt on her credibility. Having said that, the U.S. government has constructed underground facilities for national security purposes. You've got Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Greenbrier Bunker, and there's no verified information supporting existing vast secret network of bunkers built with unauthorized funds. But when I did look a little bit more into the bunker industry, it says in 2023, the market was approximately $23 billion for the underground bunker industry, and it will reach $36 billion by 2030 is the estimate. Oh, and you were talking about Zuckerberg supposedly developed a $270 million estate in Hawaii, which includes a 5,000 square foot underground shelter with food and energy supplies, an escape hatch, and heavy concrete metal-filled door. So, yeah, lots of interesting stuff.
I mean, like, to the whole point, the entire issue is like one guard with one gun takes it over. So I don't know what they're going to do. Yeah, I guess robots.
That's why they're pushing so hard on it.
Yeah, that's the other thing, though. Like right now, they're using all of their power and resources to prepare for what they know is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And like
they're forcing it to come, though, like using all of the they're using all the resources to make this come into fruition.
And the other thing is like they're gonna keep a tight lid on whatever happens until the last possible moment. I can't remember the name of the TV show, but there's a TV show about the underground bunker thing. But they do the same thing. Whenever the catastrophe comes, they wait until the last possible second when they know everyone's going to just like kill each other trying to save themselves at this point. And yeah, it's so frustrating because they're doing it right now. They're using all the power, the taxes, the influence they have. They don't care how obvious they are because it's the last ditch scramble before whatever. It's just so gross to see. So gross.
And actually, that's a good spot. So I'm just gonna close out by reading just two more paragraphs, or maybe three from this thing. So this comes right after that paragraph I finished on, which is maybe building robots to serve if technologies could develop in that time. So that's when it hit me, at least as far as these gentlemen were concerned, this was a talk about the future of technology. Taking their cue from Elon Musk colonizing Mars, Peter Thiel reversing the aging process, or Sam Altman and Ray Kurzweil uploading their minds into supercomputers, they were preparing for a digital future that had a whole lot less to do with making the world a better place than it did with transcending the human condition altogether and insulating themselves from a very real and present danger of climate change, rising sea levels, mass migrations, global pandemics, nativist panic, and resource depletion. For them, the future of technology is really about just one thing: escape. When the hedge funders asked me the best way to maintain authority over their security forces after the event, I suggested that their best bet would be to treat those people really well right now. They should be engaging with their security staffs as if they were members of their own family. And the more they can expand this ethos of inclusivity to the rest of their business practices, supply chain management, sustainability efforts, and wealth distribution, the less chance there will be of an event in the first place. All this technological wizardry could be applied towards a less romantic but entirely more collective interest right now. They were amused by my optimism, but they didn't really buy it. They were not interested in how to avoid calamity. They're convinced we are too far gone. For all their wealth and power, they don't believe they can affect the future. They are simply accepting the darkest of scenarios and then bringing whatever money and technology they can employ to insulate themselves, especially if they can't get a seat on the rocket to Mars. Really interesting article. I haven't read the book, but I probably will because, this one has stuck with me since I read it, back in like 2018 or whatever. So.
Hey, I couldn't get the whole consciousness thing out of my head. This supercomputer and the consciousness is dying. What did the guy say to that? Like, certainly the conscious die, right?
I don't think he actually addresses that specifically in the article. Like,
Yeah.
So after the first part I read where it gets to like the escapism, he basically goes through a bunch of paragraphs on like essentially talking about like historical like the 90s and like how technology developed and the way we've looked at it and how it's kind of changed our moral view of the world from a technological lens. So that's the part I skipped. It's still really interesting. Highly recommend reading it. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
In a world on the brink, one brand dared to ask, what if the apocalypse comes with a porch swing?
Introducing Victory Bunkers, the luxury subterranean freedom pods from the makers of Victory Coffee and Victory Provisions.
Whether you're fleeing the nuclear fallout, climate collapse, or peasant class rediscovering guillotines, Victory Bunkers offers the peace of mind that you deserve.
Each bunker is hand-poured with reinforced Libertium, equipped with biometric gun safes, a private barista bay, and a 5G signal boosted by the bones of failed democracies.
Your family will thrive in complete isolation, nourished by Victory brand freeze-dried charcuterie and endless reruns of Reagan speeches.
Because society may crumble, but the markets shouldn't.
Victory Bunkers not responsible for psychological deterioration, bunker feudalism, or ingestion of expired legacy protein. Some restrictions apply for non-billionaire clients. So yeah, we mentioned in last week's episode a lot about Israel, about the genocide in Gaza, about the U.S. government complicity and all that. And as the Trump administration sort of gets their foreign policy machine going, there are more and more rapid changes happening to people in Gaza, to what's going on. And so Democracy Now! Is a great news organization we mentioned before that does great reporting. They've been keeping up with this every week. Two of the journalists there at Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman and Dennis Moynihan, put out this column I think it's a weekly column they put out. This week's column they titled "The Catastrophe in Gaza, 600 Days and Counting." So I think as of today, it's 601 days since Israel launched its genocidal retaliation on the Hamas surprise attack on October 7th. I just wanted to read a couple of paragraphs from this column by Amy Goodman and Dennis Moynihan as a sort of update to what's been going on there. So they say, Israel has kept Gaza under near total siege for 3 months, preventing food, medicine, fuel, and clean water from reaching Gaza's more than 2 million residents. Deaths from starvation mount as the Israeli military bombs and assaults hospitals, homes, and tent camps for the displaced in so-called safe zones. Those Palestinians in Gaza who have miraculously avoided death or injury during Israel's more than 600-day assault and siege still face catastrophic food shortages, lack of clean water and sanitation, and the crushing physical and psychic trauma of sustained siege, hunger, and war. Al Jazeera reports that Israel is targeting community kitchens, with up to 20 of the small but vital facilities destroyed in recent weeks. This further drives the desperate population to limited aid stations set up by a shady U.S.-based Israeli-backed organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Another journalist I've mentioned in the past from Dropsite News is called Jeremy Scahill. He was actually on Democracy Now! To talk about this issue. And so Jeremy Scahill talked a lot about this organization set up with some Israeli support and its ties to CIA and Israeli intelligence. And Scahill, I'm reading from the article again now, Scahill says that GHF, what international aid officials have said are concentration camp or internment camp-like conditions to distribute paltry food aid. Troops guarding the installations have fired into the crowds, killing and injuring people seeking food. While Gazans face starvation, President Donald Trump maintains his plan for the U.S. to, quote-unquote, own Gaza and to develop it into the so-called Riviera of the Middle East. NBC reported that the Trump administration discussed plans to resettle up to 1 million Palestinians from Gaza to Libya, which the White House denies. Regardless of the destination, ethnic cleansing is a war crime and a crime against humanity. Meanwhile, citizens and students around the world continue to defy crackdowns on the Palestinian solidarity protests, demanding a just and enduring peace in Israel and Palestine. So that is just an update this week on what's going on in Gaza from Democracy Now! Since we've sort of opened that can of worms in last week's episode, I just wanted to provide some real-time updates about that as it happens. We often reflect on moments in history like the Holocaust and wonder what would have been like to live at a time when a genocide is happening. What would you have done? And this is sort of that moment we're living through. It's like it's happening, it's in our faces. So the least we can do is pay attention to it and acknowledge the truth of what's happening as it happens. And to the extent that you have the resources to donate to relief organizations, do that. Call your elected officials, tell them to stop supporting Israel. They don't really listen. I've tried, but by all means, keep calling them and telling them that. So yeah, that's just a quick update on that for me.
Food manipulation is against the Geneva Convention, okay? Starvation of civilians is a method of warfare, and it's just further suppression and oppression, and it's horrible. But the food aspect of it and getting aid, like I watched a video last night of this where Palestinians came up to, like a fenced area where the IDF had come to give them aid. And what did the IDF do? They threw grenades and they started opening fire. And yeah, I love what Joe says about, we got to be aware and to donate. That's just super important.
Yeah. And also aware, donate, and speak out. Don't let people make you be quiet by suggesting you're supporting terrorism. Correct them, right? You are not, you're doing the opposite. You don't need to support Hamas to support the people of Palestine, right? That's a different thing.
And I think like we've said this before too about like, I grew up Jewish and it's like cultural, it's religious. And that's like a perfect thing. Like they literally try to put the identity of Israel onto all these people. So it's like just dismantling that. And if somebody comes up to you and says like, oh, you're anti-Semitic or this or that, just like dismantling that whole argument is super important.
All right. Well, that probably closes out this episode.
Did they ever settle on a control method in that? Like, is it going to be call or is it going to be combination lock?
No, they didn't explicitly say what they were going to do. Based on what's going on, my guess is they're betting on robots.
Yeah, for sure.
They were like, oh, we got to be nice to people? No, let's just put billions of dollars into AI and robot development instead.
Yeah.
Hey, so this Thursday, we're not going to have an episode dropping. We're going to take a break this Thursday on the deep dive, but hopefully next week we'll come back with both a Tuesday episode and a Thursday episode to continue our series on disinformation. Like we mentioned, it's going to be talking through kind of the tech platforms more as battlegrounds and what's going on in those tech platforms, how some are fighting back, how some aren't. And then we'll be talking about some really cool things, honestly, just kind of as a preview in what some democracies and not-for-profits and citizen-formed groups have done to combat disinformation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've already hit on briefly, like Finland's response to disinformation and their kind of critical thinking programs in schools, how they approach media literacy. We'll look at 3 nation states as different examples, right? So we'll look at Finland as a good example of how they combat disinformation. We'll look at the U.S. as a country in retrograde from combating disinformation and propaganda. And then we'll look at Russia as kind of like the leader of disinformation. So we'll kind of compare those 3 different countries. And then we'll talk about, like I mentioned, those nonprofits and citizen-led groups. Some of them we've mentioned before, American Sunlight Project, and I think EU Disinfo Lab, we've mentioned that one as well. But some we haven't really mentioned too much. That's coming into like Bellingcat, right? Bellingcat's like an open source investigation firm. So we'll talk a little bit about them and the work that they've done. And we'll also talk about, like I mentioned, citizen groups and citizen coalitions, one of them being NAFO, or the North Atlantic Fellow Organization that started in response to Russian disinformation in Ukraine as part of the Ukraine war. It'll explore how people use memes trying to game algorithms to fight back against disinformation. So there is some more positive things in the next episode when we get into Disinformation Part 3. But just a little preview for when we do that. That'll probably be not this Tuesday, but maybe next Tuesday. Or next Thursday.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoyed the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review, share it with your friends or family, or anyone who'd get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow. And the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
Until next time.
Stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
Propaganda loves you.